Ah, there you are, traveller. You're just in time for another Old World battle report. This time, my Tomb Kings are facing off against demons in a 2,000-point meeting engagement scenario. Army lists are in the video description should you wish to peruse them, and I'll just run the deployment past you before we start. Oh, and there'll be a short channel update at the end of the video, so do stay till the end. I get very lucky with my meeting engagement rolls, and everything starts on the table, except for one scorpion which I chose to ambush. My Tomb King and Necrosphynx deploy aggressively in the center, along with aggressive Necropolis Knights on the right flank, the rest of my armies quite a bit further back. For the first time I decided to drop the catapult, as it's done very little for me in previous battles. And just a quick aside, to hopefully head off any contentions, those of you who've taken a look at my list may have noticed that I've decked my king out with full defensive kit, with the Armour of Ages and the Talisman of Protection. I'm well aware by now that this is a somewhat obnoxiously strong setup, but this match is practice for an upcoming tournament, so I thought I'd better take the strongest king possible. Anyway, let's take a look at the demons. A Bloodthirster is positioned out on the left flank, protected from the Ushabti's greatbows by a ruin. 5 Seekers of Slaanesh are deployed further forward, ready to strike. In the center are his Flamers and Exalted Flamer, 12 Pink Horrors, and a level 4 Tzeentch Demon Prince. His Chaos Furies take the right flank. A unit of 14 Bloodletters rolled a 1, so has to come on as reinforcements, and he's also placed 5 Flesh-hounds in ambush. Here's a different angle so you can see our armies arrayed in full. His Furies vanguarded into this position, as did my Scorpion. Demons finish deploying first and get the first turn. The screeching Seekers waste no time and hurl themselves into the Tomb Scorpion. The Bloodthirster, fearing the Ushabti, plays it safe and stays out of sight behind the ruins. The Furies flap into the ruins on the other side of the table. The Demon Prince tries for a charge on the Necropolis Knights, but it's a bit far, and he doesn't make it. Nothing of note really happens in terms of magic or shooting, I think, so it's just on to the one combat. The Seekers have a decent amount of attacks and poison on their steeds, but strength 3 across the board means they need 6s to wound the Scorpion. They don't get lucky, causing only 1 wound and losing 4 models in return. In my turn 1, my King and Sphinx both charge the Pink Horrors, and the Necropolis Knights charge the Demon Prince. The rest of my army shambles forwards as quickly as it can, which isn't very quick at all. Note that the Scorpion has had its wound healed back. A closer look at my charges. The Sphinx has taken a wound already, which I think may have been from the Pink Horrors' stand and shoot. Speaking of shooting, with the Bloodthirster still out of sight, my Ushabti take aim at the Flamers and successfully send one screeching back to the realm of chaos. I cast no spells, as there's simply nothing I need to or am able to cast. Just so you know, my spells are Desiccation, Plague of Rust, Summon Elemental Spirit, and Windblast. A rather paltry selection in my opinion. So it's straight on to combat then. In the center, my King and Sphinx savage the Pink Horrors, killing all but 2, who then promptly evaporate. The Horrors did manage to put another wound on the Sphinx before disappearing though, with the Banner of Change, which causes 3d6 strength 2 hits at the start of the combat phase. Next, the Demon Prince strikes first against my Snake Riders, even though they charged, due to its high initiative. It cuts one of them down, and in return they do 2 wounds to it. The Prince does unleash a demonic assailment spell against them, but it's not very effective, as it's only strength 2 versus the toughness 4 of the snakes. Finally, in the center, the Scorpion finishes off the last Seeker and snips its claws in triumph at the Flamers in the distance. Demons turn 2. The Bloodletters arrive on the right flank at the rear. The Furies charge the rear of the snakes. Realizing he has to take decisive action to halt the rampage of the undead monsters, The Bloodthirster flies out towards them as the flamers move towards the Scorpion, ready to douse it in chaotic warp fire. The Flesh-hounds don't arrive from ambush. Oh, and note the position of my king and Sphinx. They had to stay awkwardly facing the enemy table edge because they didn't have any room to turn in a more useful direction due to blocking each other. This was quite annoying. In shooting, the flamers try their best against the Scorpion, but roll quite poorly and come unstuck against its high toughness, only causing a single wound. Combat sees the combined efforts of the Demon Prince and Furies finish off the Necropolis Knights, but not before they bring the Prince down to its final wound. Both units overrun to these positions, the Prince because it wanted to, and the Furies because they failed to restrain themselves. My turn too. Because they overran, the Sphinx is able to get an easy charge in on the Furies. The Scorpion charges the flamers. The king can't see anything, so he just turns to face the Bloodthirster. My other units continue to move up, except for the Ushabti, who want to get maximum shots off against the towering Demon of Khorne. In shooting, they land a few hits on him, but the Thirster proves too tough, and their bolts bounce off harmlessly. In combat, the Sphinx easily slays the Furies, and reforms to turn around, and the Scorpion slays all but one of the flamers, taking a wound in return. It still has 2 wounds left, because it was healed earlier this turn. Demons, turn 3. The Bloodthirster charges my Tomb King. The Flesh-hounds fail to arrive again. The Demon Prince casts Steed of Shadows on the Bloodletters, giving them Fly 12 and allowing them to surge across the table and towards my infantry. There's nothing else to note then, before we turn to this mighty clash in the center of the table. The Bloodthirster hefts his demonic great axe, and I learn that it has the Monster Slayer ability. Just a single 6 to wound could slay my general outright. The initial wound roll does produce a 6, but fortunately when the wounds are re-rolled, due to the Armour of Ages, no 6s remain. The king takes just a single wound. The Bloodthirster takes a couple of wounds in return, but rolls poorly on his leadership check, and takes some more from demonic instability, surviving with just 1 wound remaining. If you're confused by the picture, it's because I myself use my dice to mark wounds remaining, whereas my opponent marks wounds suffered. Strangely, I've noticed quite a few Old World players use this latter method. Finally, the Scorpion takes another wound from the last flamer, but then finishes it off, and turns to face the Bloodthirster, pincers itching to get stuck into a worthier opponent than the 2 units it's already snipped to death. So it's on to my turn 3. 2 charges, the Scorpion into the Thirster, and the Sphinx into the rear of the Bloodletters. Well, once again, there's nothing interesting in shooting or magic, so it's straight on to combat. The Sphinx easily crushes the Bloodletters, leaving just 2 left alive after instability. The central combat is a tense affair. The Dragon, King, and Scorpion all fail to rob the Bloodthirster of his last wound. The Thirster then heaves his great axe at my king once more, but again fails to land the crucial killing strike, and just causes 2 wounds. It's then on to stomps, and I decide to go with the Scorpion first. Give the little fella a shot at its biggest kill yet, I suppose. It does cause a wound with its stomp, and the Bloodthirster fails to save it, and disappears back into the warp with a sickening squelch, or whatever sound demons make when they're banished. With the death of the Bloodthirster, and the only demons left being the Demon Prince, 2 Bloodletters, and a delayed pack of Flesh-hounds, there's nothing more demons can do now, so we call the game there. And there you have it. From the demon side, there were definitely some untimely batches of poor dice rolls, and the Bloodthirster failing in his monster-slaying role hastened the end of a battle which was already rapidly falling apart for them. As for my own army, the vast majority of it didn't do anything at all, and my infantry blocks stood on the sidelines once again, while my powerhouse units did all the work. I'm currently working on some chariots and a big unit of skeleton archers so that I can fill my core choices out with units that can actually contribute to the battle instead of just shuffling forwards. And notably, I don't think I even attempted to cast a single spell, as there was simply never an occasion when there was a spell worth casting which was worth the risk of a miscast. Anyway, with all that being said, I mentioned at the start of the report that there'd be a channel update at the end of the video, so here it is. My reports have received a very positive response, with subscribers to the channel growing at a much faster rate than I'd anticipated. This is great news, and I'd like to thank all of you for supporting the channel. Creating the voiceover for these videos actually costs me a bit of money, and I hope to expand my armies and unit choices within each army to eventually be able to play different kinds of lists and so on. With that in mind, I'm considering launching a Patreon, where those of you who are so inclined can contribute a small amount towards the upkeep of the channel. I'm unlikely to be able to offer anything in terms of rewards apart from your name enshrined in a credit section of each video, but if I can at least cover my costs and perhaps fund a few old world purchases here and there, I'll be more than happy. I know the current rate of video releases has been fairly slow, and I can't really envisage being able to produce more than one video every few weeks or so at the moment, as other commitments are preventing me from attending weekend tournaments and frequently cause me to miss even midweek gaming clubs. In fact, this latest game was tournament practice, but for my opponent, not for me. But if there's sufficient interest, I might even be able to look into travelling further afield for games and tournaments in future, and hopefully, in this way, I may be able to get more reports up more frequently. Anyway, I just thought I'd mention it here first of all to see what kind of reaction the suggestion gets. Having said that, thanks to my opponent, thanks for watching the report, and I hope to see you in the next one. Goodbye.